Welcome to the Nourished Child Podcast, a show about childhood nutrition, feeding kids, and dealing with the ups and downs of growing a healthy child. Here's your host, registered dietitian and childhood nutrition expert, Jill Castle.
I'm Jill, the host of The Nourished Child. Let me ask you something. Do you wonder if your child is getting all the nutrition they need? Or do you feel unsure about what's going on with your child and their eating? Feeding kids is H-A-R-D hard. I've raised 4 of my own children, and as a pediatric dietitian who works with kids and families, I know the job of nourishing and nurturing our children is a big one, full of emotional swings, frustrations, and worries. That's why I created thenourishedchild.com, the ultimate parent resource for children's nutrition and feeding. There, you will find free articles, e-guides, and programs to help you better understand your child, food, your own feeding, and their eating. Check out The Nourished Child today. Head to thenourishedchild.com. And now for the show. Hey there, welcome to the Nourished Child Podcast. I'm Jill Castle. If this is your first time here, I'm a pediatric dietitian and mom to 4 grown kids. I run the nourishedchild.com website, a nutrition education site for parents, and I help families in my one-to-one private practice, and my 6th book is coming out in August. Kids Thrive at Every Size is a book for parents of 3 to 13-year-olds who want to establish lifestyle habits that promote physical health and emotional well-being. I believe that healthy doesn't have a size. So if you're raising a larger, smaller, or in-between child and you want them to be healthy and happy, this book is for you. I outline 8 pillars of wellness and help you nourish your whole child. Pre-orders are ready. So head over to thenourishedchild.com/Kids Thrive at Every Size and reserve your copy today. So this is episode number 206, and we are talking about 6 principles for introducing new foods to young children. But before we get going, I want to review a recent piece of research that came out that's a longitudinal study that looked at sensory exploratory behaviors in preschool children and how that related to whether they were accepting of new foods or not. So it was a 3-year longitudinal study, including observational data collected from over 240 preschoolers. At age 4, children were asked to taste 4 new foods. An experimenter recorded the child's displays of smelling, licking, spitting, refusal to eat, and acceptance. Assessments were repeated at 4.5 years of age, 5.5 years of age, and 6.5 years of age. And summary scores were created for each child by totaling the number of foods that they smelled, licked, spit out, refused, and acceptance at each point in time. They also examined individual sensory behavior tendencies and how those were related to the child's food acceptance. The results: spitting and refusals to eat decreased over time, and food acceptances increased over time. That makes sense. We know that the more kids are exposed, the more time kids have to engage with food, the more likely they are to accept food over time. The researchers also found that decreases in licking, spitting, and refusals were associated with increases in acceptance across a study period. They surmised that the decline in young children's sensory exploration with new foods was associated with increases in food acceptance. In other words, the more sensory exploratory behaviors a child has probably promotes some familiarity that they experience with different foods. And these help children learn that new foods are acceptable and safe to consume. So the bottom line is, the more kids engage with foods and have experiences with them, the more likely they are to accept them over time. Nothing new, but it's nice to see. This study was 2023 study, so a newer study. And I just wanted to pop that in just to reinforce that even though these are associations in a lot of the research that we see on kids' eating behaviors, This is more of a longitudinal study. So they looked at kids over a 3-year time span, which helps confirm the results a little bit more. And again, every time we have a new study that comes out that reinforces what we know, it reinforces what we know, right? Okay, let's move on and talk about 6 principles to remember or to think about when you're trying to introduce new foods to young kids. Now, every child is different, and so your child may react to new foods very differently than even another child in your same family. But these are generalized principles that will help make the experience more engaging and positive for your child. And you probably know some of these already, but it's kind of nice to have them all in one fell swoop here. So the first one is no pressure. So no pressure. That means heavy encouragement. Oh, try this. You will like it. Or look at your brother. He eats it. You should eat it too. Those are feelings of pressure. Those are ways that parents put a lot of pressure on their kids to try something new. And what ends up happening for a lot of kids is that they resist. They resist trying in order to keep themselves safe, and in order to avoid that pressure, they just refuse to try. And so my first one here is no pressure. If you find yourself at the dinner table talking about the food that you want your child to eat or to try, if you find yourself encouraging or nagging your child to take a bite of this or that, or to just try it, you'll like it, that is pressure. And most children do experience that as pressure, and it can be counterproductive to having them try something new. So number 1, no pressure. Number 2, no trade-offs. So if you take a bite of this broccoli, you can have dessert. If you just try this, you can have some extra TV time. These are trade-offs or rewards. They're meant to incentivize your child to try something new. But when we use an incentive like a food reward, for example, dessert, children do not gain the internal motivation to try new foods. What they gain is a motivation to do something because of the reward that they're going to receive. And when it comes to food rewards, that can change a child's perception of how food ranks in their mind. So if you're offering ice cream for a bite of broccoli, the hierarchy between broccoli and ice cream shifts to favor the ice cream. So kids actually, in their minds, they think that ice cream is more important than the broccoli. So that doesn't really help us teach our children to try lots of different foods and eat nutritious foods. It can actually teach children that ice cream or desserts or other things that you're using to reward them are more important than the food you're trying to get them to eat. So number 2, no trade-offs, no, food rewards or other incentivizers that might undermine your child's natural motivation to explore new foods and engage with it. Number 3, third principle, smaller is better. So young children, especially when they get platefuls of foods, can get overwhelmed. And that in and of itself can turn them off and make them hesitant to try something new. So I always like to say that when you're offering your child something new, to make it as small as the tip of your pinky, really tiny, like the size of a pea or a kernel of corn. Why? Because most children will feel bigger than that. They will feel more confident. And in their brain or in their mind, they'll look at that tiny piece of food and think, oh, I can handle that. So smaller is better really takes the overwhelm that can potentially happen to young children when they see large portions or a pile of food on the plate. The idea is to help your child think, this is not a problem. This is really small. I can handle this. Number 4, sensory exploration, which is really what that former conversation about that study was all about. young children are very much in exploration mode. If you look at their developmental milestones in terms of cognition, they are learning basic language about food and the characteristics of food, and they do that through engaging with food. So for both toddlers and preschools, we want to keep sensory and food exploration fun and engaging. So toddlers, touch it, pick it up, smell it, kiss it, lick it, put it in the mouth, chew it, spit it out if they don't like it, or swallow it. All of that is legitimately trying a new food or engaging with a new food. If you want to teach your toddler about food and talk about food, I did an episode recently on how to talk to toddlers about food. And really, the heart and soul of it is using descriptor words to name food and describe characteristics about food so that you are building the language of your toddler. So toddlers don't need to know that broccoli has a lot of fiber. Toddlers don't need to know that a plant-based diet is a healthy way to eat. They don't need that. What they need is these are red peppers. This is broccoli. Very basic descriptor words so that they can build their language. In preschoolers and older children, it's really about having them engage with food. So that could be as simple as reading books about food, cooking together, letting them take on some of the skills like stirring batter or tearing up lettuce, shopping together, bringing them to the grocery store and letting them choose, do you want romaine lettuce this week or should we get butter lettuce this week? Just letting them learn about food in real time and also make choices about food. So engaging their drive for autonomy. Also, preschoolers really like to or are really receptive to gaming around food. So you can do a taste test with lots of foods with tiny little spoons or lining different foods up and just having them describe their senses. What does this look like? What does this smell like? What does it taste like? That can be really fun and super beneficial to preschoolers. And you can notice that none of this engages pressure. None of this engages trade-offs. It's really about exploration and engagement with food. So those senses that children are naturally born with, they need to be engaged, and food is a really easy way to do that. We talk about babies and letting them touch their yogurt and feed themselves. Yes, it makes a mess. Somebody just recently on a golfing trip I was on, my playing partner is a new grandmother and her child has a child and they're introducing new foods. And she said, man, the new way people are feeding their kids now with letting them smear yogurt all over their face and in their hair, it's a mess. And I reemphasized that, yes, it is. That's why we have kitchen sinks so we can bathe them right after they eat. And that's why we strip them down to a diaper so that it's easy to clean them up. But I reemphasized to her that, this is such a period of time where young children are building their senses and mastery of recognizing their senses, mastery of recognizing smells and tastes and textures, that is so crucial from the get-go, really, from 6 months and on through age 5. Engaging these senses is so, so very important. All right, number 5. No shame, no blame. So taking a different sort of pressure off of children in terms of we don't ever want them to feel shamed or shameful about not liking a food. We don't ever want to blame them for not cooperating. Remember, young children need to have autonomy over their bodies. We talk about this a lot with just touch, teaching our young children. I remember when my kids were young, teaching them what kind of touch was okay and what kind of touch was not okay. Think about that when we think about food and eating. What is okay? If you have autonomy over your body, you have autonomy over your mouth, what goes in it in terms of food. We do not need to be blaming or shaming children about refusing to put something in their mouth and eat it. So I like the phrase, you don't have to eat it. It really disengages this sort of perceived shame or blame or pressure to eat. And I think also parents do really well when they are somewhat nonchalant about it. And, they respond like, okay, today's not the day. That's okay. There's lots of foods that we can choose and try. It's okay. Tomorrow's another day. You don't have to eat this. And so I think as a parent, we need to be mindful of our children's autonomy and also watchful of our children's reactions. If you see your child struggling or really being hesitant, take the pressure off and let them disengage. It's okay. There's so many foods that our kids can taste and try. And we're not on a time frame. We're not on a trajectory. It's really, so some things are going to be winners and foods are going to be losers. That's okay. Remember, taste buds change over time. They get more mature, more accepting. And the more you expose your child, the more likely they will accept new foods. And the last principle or the last reminder I have for you is tasting is not eating. Okay, so a child can kiss a piece of food they've never had. They can lick it, they can chew it, they can spit it out. That's all tasting. Swallowing food, chewing it and swallowing it is eating. And so when we are trying to engage young children with new foods, yes, our goal is to get them to taste it. Our goal is not necessarily to get them to eat it. But if you can cross that first barrier with touching their lips with a raspberry or letting them lick an apple or an Asian pear or licking a piece of seasoned cauliflower, for example, letting them just get the flavor on their taste bud, that's a huge win. And so I want to reassure you that that is something that needs to happen before a lot of kids will be willing to eat a new food. They need to taste it first. And so I want to release you from this perceived obligation that your child has to eat a new food. Just tasting it, even if they just take their finger and try to get some of the sauce maybe on broccoli, like a cheese sauce, and lick that finger, that's a taste, and a taste is the goal. So there you have it, folks. 6 principles for introducing new foods to young children. Number 1, no pressure. Number 2, no trade-offs. Number 3, smaller is better. Number 4, fun and engaging sensory exploration. Number 5, no shame, no blame. And number 6, tasting is not eating, and tasting is the goal. So there you have it. I hope this was helpful for you. If you have a child under the age of 5, these are principles that I think you should keep in mind, especially as you're bringing new foods to the table. And in doing so, I believe that you will have an easier time, and so will your child. That's it for today, folks. Thanks for being here and for listening. As always, give that child in your life a loving squeeze today. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Nourished Child Podcast, where the #1 goal is to help you grow a nourished child inside and out.